Welcome to the Data Center Hawk podcast. Today we're talking about 2023 predictions in the data center market.
Our industry over the last year or so has experienced some characteristics and things it never has before. And we're in a really unique time. There's a lot of people in the last year that have won in our space, which has been really fun to see. There's been a ton of demand, a lot of sites being purchased and power being delivered to meet the requirements that are out there. I think that we'll see, as we mentioned before, a period where things are going to change over the next 6 months.
You're listening to the Data Center Hawk podcast, where we demystify the data center market. Data Center Hawk is your online platform for data and commentary on the data center market. Stay tuned and be sure to join the thousands of others who rely on Data Center Hawk to make decisions in the data center space.
All right, David, this is one of my favorite podcasts of the year where we talk about looking forward, what do we predict will happen in the data center market? And no one, I submit, is better equipped to answer that question than you. So.
And I think, is this the third one of these we've done now?
I think it's the third one, which is funny.
Not the third one for 2023. People are like, y'all done that 3 times. No, we did 2021.
We're going to record 3 different 2023 prediction pods, and then at the end of the year, we're going to go back and delete the ones that were wrong.
We're so smart.
Now, speaking of that, I did go back and look at our 2022 predictions pod. This is actually some interesting stuff. So I thought it'd be fun to go through and say, what did we get right? What did we get wrong?
Let's go.
And just, when I say we, I mean you.
Accountability.
Because you're on the hook for these.
Accountability. Here we go.
Okay. So end of 2021, we record these before we finalize our numbers for the year. But we said the North American primary markets grew about 12 to 14%. You said, quote, we expect this to increase, end quote. Correct or not correct?
Correct.
I'm going to say it's correct.
That's
and
right.
the answer is 27.4%.
Yep.
The grew. And that's an estimate based on where we're at in the year today. Okay.
Yeah, and actually a lot of that is tied to pre-leasing. We count that as market growth, but it points to how much the North American market, almost basically doubling the percentage of growth. So a lot of growth in 2022.
And it was worth noting that not everybody shared that belief. I think there were some that were thinking there'd be a pullback.
That's right.
Didn't happen.
That's right.
Correct. One of one. Prediction number 2. You thought operators will bring turnkey and shell capacity to the market.
Yes.
Correct or not correct?
Not correct. I mean, the not correct on the shell piece. I mean, I think the reason I was making that statement back then, we were talking about this the other day, was because we were trying to show that there was a difference in product being brought to the market, that the turnkey data center that traditionally has been delivered, that's with all the mechanical and electrical equipment being delivered, that there was going to be another approach would be, hey, let's just build the shell. One of the reasons that didn't happen was because a lot has been pre-leased. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, before you even start building it, it could be leased. And number 2, to build that would take a while. But those are excuses.
Sure.
And everybody's got them, and they
1.5 out of 2.
Yes.
All right. Prediction number 3: demand will grow in 2022.
Correct.
That's a correct capital letters there. Yes. So just a couple stats around that. North America, basically 76% more for all of 2021 through 3 quarters of 2022.
Yep.
Europe, 45% more in 2022 versus 2021, and then Europe is about basically APAC is basically matched 2021 through 3 quarters of 2022.
Yeah,
so
I think those
are resounding correct.
Yeah, those in the space know this. I mean, we've just seen incredible demand. Now, some of that is starting to taper a bit, but
whoa! This is not the prediction section. This is the review section, sir. Hold that thought. Yes, again, resounding correct. Now, we may not have predicted the magnitude, but the general direction was correct. So 2 out of 3. Prediction 4: second-gen space will become more valuable due to rising lease rates.
Yeah, true.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, that's been really interesting to watch, the way that both end users and those that own the second-generation space are viewing that today. Historically, churn has not been a good thing.
It's a bit of a 4-letter word.
Yeah, that's right. And now I would tell you that, if you can get back a data hall or 2 megawatts or 3 megawatts in a market today that was priced, 5 years ago, you've got the opportunity to really increase the rate there.
Absolutely. All right, and prediction number 5, which may have been your boldest yet.
Bold person.
Based on where we had seen things historically, you said pricing, quote, conditions should be in place for pricing to go up. End
That's
quote.
Right. Correct.
And that is correct.
Pricing has risen.
Significantly and materially, which, again, another thing that a lot of people may not have seen, just because historically they'd always gone down, and we're continuing to go down even towards the end of last year.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people maybe in our space and outside to understand that, the rising prices, I think, have been more related to the changes in the economic environment around, labor costs and inflation and all the things around the construction industry and things getting more expensive. But they're also, I think, for the first time, we've seen data center operators become more aggressive in raising their pricing because there's less options out there. I mean, you can't, if you're a data center user and you're renewing, your lease renewal is coming up, and your leverage in the market is, hey, we're going to go look at 10 other places where we can put this 2 megawatt requirement. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. You can't do that anymore. And a data center operator go, oh, okay, wait, we'll lower our rate. That doesn't work. So different day.
Yeah, and I think we covered this at length in the Shifts in the Data Center podcast we did a month or two ago. So if you want more info on that pricing specific dynamics, check that out. All right, so 4 out of 5, not bad.
Hey, I'll take it.
So today we got, I think, 6 or 7 predictions.
That's Hall of Fame worthy.
If you're a batter, for 80%,
sure. 80%, dude? Come on, man. You're getting in at 30%. Anyway.
All right, Punxsutawney Phil, let's go. Year of our Lord 20 and 23 predictions.
That's right.
So give me like the high level kind of trends you're expecting to see, and we can dive into a couple of those in more detail.
Yes. So I think, if you think supply, demand, those basic I guess, different aspects of our space. I think that the delivery side of things will get, from a supply perspective, will get harder. I think we will see a pullback in demand. I think you will see continual price increases. We talked the other day about the M&A activity in our space, and I think that you'll see, more of that than you did in 2022. So let's start with those.
All right, let's start with this. Okay, so difficulty in delivery. This has been a trend that's certainly accentuated almost really since COVID, but more in the last kind of 9 to 12 months.
Yep.
Hard to get land. Yep. Hard to get power. Hard to get equipment. Hard to get labor. So how do you see that trend changing throughout 2023?
There's a term, it's got to get worse before it gets better. I think that in a number of these areas, it's gotten as worse as it's going to get. So I think there are some of these that you go, hey, the timeline is already so far that it's not going to get further than that to deliver a UPS system or whatever it might be. There are some areas, though, that you're going to have to go through a rough period before it can get back to a more standard approach of delivering power through transmission lines and multiple sites that can meet the need in a timely manner. So, and I think that's the interesting thing about our space is that we really have like constraint in not just the equipment, which is like supply chain issue, put it in that category, but you have problems with the real estate and the real estate competing with industrial sites. And the fact that like typically industrial developers will make decisions faster than a data center developer would because, number one, the industrial developer is committing less money. So, it's bigger risk for the data center operator. And so, you put all that stuff together and it's gotten challenging. I was talking to a data center operator the other day that said everything's gotten really hard. It's hard enough to bring 100 megawatts to a site, figure that out. But when you do that in the midst of an area that can't deliver that or multiple sites competing for that 100 megawatts or the 100 megawatt piece of paper that you had doesn't mean that you have 100 megawatts, it's gotten hard. So I just think that you will see those projects continually be hard to deliver based on multiple factors.
So costs go up, timelines get longer.
Yep.
Pushes development to other markets / sub-markets. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. Pullback from larger users. So I think this is something we're already maybe starting to see or hear kind of rumors of wars here. So how do you see that playing out, or what have you heard, and how do you see that impacting the space?
Yeah, a lot of our growth over the last 3 years has been related to the hyperscale sector. And I think with those companies, they're working through a lot of challenges right now. One challenge is how much demand they have and how to appropriately plan for that. Another is the economic conditions today and what they will be a year from now, and how to run an organization within the midst of those. So you put all those things together, and those large users have taken some pretty big bites over the last year to 2 years of capacity. And so I think we're seeing the evolution of the way that our infrastructure gets consumed. There's periods where a lot gets taken, and then there's periods where it kind of goes quiet. And I think that you'll see over the next probably 3 to 6 months one of those quieter periods from some of the larger users that have had a big impact from an absorption standpoint. This industry is a victim of its own success. The minute that historical highs are hit from an absorption perspective, the question becomes, how can we keep that pace? Even in the midst of maybe a slower period over the next 6 months, that will still be larger than the biggest year we had in 2018, back to 2018. So I think it's one of the reasons that a great site like Data Center Hawk is helpful, because it helps you build context around a historical view of our market. And not to pontificate, but I will. This industry is so young. We still are, like, in my opinion, in like only the second big run up on demand. The first one was like in 2018, and now we're in kind of potentially kind of topping out at the second one. So I think everybody, deep breath. A lot going on in our space. If we don't have 250 megawatts of absorption in, 5 different markets next quarter, I still think everything is going to be okay in our space. So I think you'll see slower growth, and it's not just, and even too on maybe some of the enterprise companies as well. I think they have to, their infrastructure decisions, I think, are impacted probably more by what's some of the economic ups and downs. And so I think you'll see maybe some banks, technology companies, insurance companies pause a bit in what they're doing.
Yeah. Speaking of economics, so the lease pricing, again, we've shared multiple times here that has started to trend upwards. And has in fact trended upwards for the first time really ever. How do you see that continuing through the year 2023?
Yeah, I mean, the price increases has had just as much to do as with the demand increase as it has to do with like the lack of supply. So even though we might see somewhat of a tail off in demand, I don't think that you'll see significant changes with the rates because or like decreases in the rates because there's no supply. I mean, there's just very limited supply, and that's not a problem that can be fixed quickly. That's an interesting thing about our industry is you can't just go build a data center in 3 months or 6 months. There's so much planning, so much time, so much capital that has to go into these decisions that the change is slower. So I still think we're going to be in a period where we see those lease rates, increasing, and a lot of that is, in each sector, retail, wholesale, hyperscale. What's interesting to watch is how some of the escalations are being tied to the CPI rates and the increases there, and in some of the changes that we've seen there. We've never seen that happen in our space. So it's a totally different approach to that, and I think that that's not something that will change anytime soon.
Yeah, you made a good point about the dynamics for each of those kind of lease sizes is different. The retail buyer is very different than hyperscale buyer, which is very different than wholesale, and there's different challenges. We talked in the past about kind of wholesale buyers being left out in the cold because companies are holding entire buildings for the hyperscales, and
they're not going and building the next building for the wholesale. So that's the world they find themselves in.
Yeah, very interesting.
And actually, somebody mentioned, so this is a little off topic, but kind of an interesting note from a conversation I had. Somebody mentioned like the 1 to 2 megawatt, 4 megawatt privately owned, data center in a box that can be built quickly and in different places across the U.S. That's much more interesting today than it was however long ago, because if you're a user and you have 5 3 megawatt requirements, 4 megawatt requirements, and you want to place them with someone around the country, you can't. Because they don't exist. That does not exist, and it can't even exist in the shell that's been delivered. That's just sitting.
And it certainly can't exist. To add another layer to that, if you wanted to do with a single provider,
right, 100%,
even less likely to happen.
That's right.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Thanks for bringing that up.
My pleasure. Every once in a while, I'll take us down into the black hole of David's mind, and that's what you get.
We'd go proceed with caution.
That's what you get. That's right.
Okay, so next M&A. So we've talked about this, and we've specifically seen that, you've seen some of the take-private transactions that have happened with QTS, IrisOne, Switch this week, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you've also seen a lot of international acquisition. Companies, North America, typically U.S.-based companies who are expanding internationally through acquisition. Terraco, Digital Realty Terraco, EdgeConneX, Adani in India, EdgeConneX Main One in Africa, Equinix, Entel in Chile. And I had Blackstone on this. It wasn't really an acquisition, but this newly formed Lumina Infra Venture, $25 billion, $20 billion. So these companies, big focus on international expansion. And it's really a win-win. These U.S.-based companies can bring their expertise to bear, but they gain all of the kind of local knowledge, what it takes to develop a data center in this locality. So you see this continuing, kind of up or down from an M&A standpoint.
Yeah, it's got to, especially if you want to. I mean, if you're buying a parcel in the U.S., and looking to get 100 megawatts delivered to that parcel in a 3 to 5 year period, I mean, that got a lot harder the last few years. Try doing that in another country where you don't have the experience, relationships, all the things that it takes to get that done. So I think more than ever, the value of being able to acquire or work with companies that already are established in these markets it's critical for success. I was down at a panel in Austin probably 3 months ago, and I remember someone mentioning in Latin America, if you think you're going to come down here and you have a letter that says you have 100 megawatts, you don't. It's like
we've heard the same thing in Europe. Like, these hoity-toity North American operators can just come in here and do things the way they've always done them. It's just not true.
That's right, and I think that some of that is I think the North American data center operators certainly have the expertise to go and build and do things in different places. It's just those areas work differently than the U.S. And so I think they've gotten smart and I think are putting a lot more strategic thought now. And as you mentioned, the list that you just did, those acquisitions are very strategic. So I think based on that and based on the challenges with supply delivery, you will see that becoming more and more important because of the nuts and bolts of how hard it is to grow, but also too, this is just becoming a global business. I mean, you have to be, if you want to compete at the level that these groups want to, you have to be able to offer a global portfolio. So you want to offer a customer something that they experience in this region, similar to what they would experience in this region, and that's the best. There's always it's what
That's why McDonald's is so popular.
There you go.
Cheeseburger here, get cheeseburger in France.
Sure.
Cheeseburger in Africa.
That's right. So if I might pontificate again.
Come on. Go in the PZ.
One of the things that I think comes up that's kind of confusing to the market is, I'll call it shadow absorption, which is, let's say that we report that 30 megawatts has been absorbed in a market in one period of time, a quarter. Someone will look at the deals that they saw and go, we got 10% of that, and we didn't even see that many deals. Where'd they come from? And what it is, it's a company that says, hey, data center operator in Chicago, I have this footprint with you. I want that same thing in London. And the deal never comes to the market. It gets done, and it's a 2 megawatt deal that gets counted demand, but no one ever saw it because it's not shopped in the market like some of these other deals are. But my point is, as a supplier, that's the menu you want to put in front of users and make it like an easy button where, hey, that same thing you have here, you can have over here.
Shadow absorption sounds like a crime drama in the data center space.
We should start.
Clive Cussler, get somebody
content.
on that. Yeah, John Grisham to write that.
Threat level midnight. It's in the office with Michael Scott's.
Oh, so great. Okay, all good points. And like you said, that is, if you think, fast forward 20 years in the space, you would certainly expect to have a number of global operators with mature global footprints.
Yeah.
Sure. If you think that's where we're going to be in 10, 20 years, it makes sense that these companies are marching that way.
Yep.
And the easiest way out of the path of least resistance being acquisition.
Yep, that's right.
All right, and the last piece we want to talk about is something we've touched on this podcast before, is like the way development shifts around either within markets or kind of within regions.
Yes.
So we've talked about this, and we've seen this happen over the last year or so, is that even within a specific market, you'll see submarkets growing disproportionately to the market as a whole.
Yep.
And then you've also seen demand shift entirely to new markets. So again, we see this trend developing. Do you see it continuing? Do you see it accelerating? How does I see that playing out?
Yeah, I think it has to accelerate because of the infrastructure delivery issues. If the demand is there and the timing has to be met, and the infrastructure is not in the place where it needs to be, then the demand moves to where the infrastructure is. And so if the infrastructure is not in the primary core part of a traditional major data center market, it's going to move to a sub-market, a different sub-market within that. So if you think of Dallas, that would be right now South Dallas. If you think of Northern Virginia, it would be Manassas, south of Manassas, Leesburg, Reston, Fairfax County. If you think of Phoenix, you're talking about like Goodyear, Mesa, even like North Goodyear. If you're talking about Chicago, it's more like West Chicago outside of, Elk Grove Village, kind of like, squeezing everything you can out of Elk Grove Village, if you know, or, over to like the west, like of that. So that's at the sub-market level, which we'll see some areas that have never seen data center development in these markets grow. And then the other thing you mentioned is just it moving from market to market, or, demand just going someplace that the infrastructure is versus waiting for the infrastructure to be delivered in one of these big markets. The 4 markets that come to mind when I think about this stuff today are Minneapolis, Salt Lake City, Austin, Columbus. There's a lot happening in those markets, a lot of interest, and there's a clearer path in some of those places to sites that can handle a lot of capacity, the power infrastructure needed to get it there, the connectivity, the cost. You put all that together, and for me, it feels like you'll see some secondary markets grow significantly. And this is like, we bring up Portland a lot with Hillsboro. 4 or 5 years ago, there were, 1 or 2 different data center operators that were there. And now there's 5 or 6 that have done some like significant leasing. The market's like 4 times what it was 3 or 4 years ago. I think you'll see the same thing in these other areas that I mentioned, over a period of time. But that's going to look this year like a lot of growth.
Yeah. And I will shameless plug that we are adding that sub-market breakdown to the site. We'll be online probably mid next year.
That's right.
But if you have questions about that, you can certainly reach out to us, because that is a very hyper-specific analysis that can be very meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, and the nuance behind some of that growth on the secondary markets is that like some of that significant growth is like by one data center operator with one requirement. And it's a really large hyperscale company or social media company or someone that comes in and takes a really big footprint. So it doubles the market. So it's important to note that like it's not like all of a sudden you see all these banks or insurance companies, coming flooding a market. But I do think that when these smaller markets grow and their exposure grows, different capital gets invested there, and it does pave the way for the enterprise market to grow in an area that they traditionally haven't.
Yeah, you certainly see when a large user makes an investment in a market, typically growth will follow on. But you may see, for example, Minneapolis double.
Yes.
From capacity. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the next big thing. It just means one company made a decision to place capacity there for a very specific reason, potentially. So, but again, it's a meaningful data point.
Yes, and here are my closing thoughts.
Let's hear them.
On 2023. So, our industry over the last year or so has experienced some characteristics and things it never has before. And we're in a really unique time. There's a lot of people in the last year that have won in our space, which has been really fun to see. There's been a ton of demand, a lot of sites being purchased and power being delivered to meet the requirements that are out there. I think that we'll see, as we mentioned before, a period where things are going to change over the next 6 months related to the demand that's out there. And so I think it's just important for everyone to remember where we are within this, within our industry, and understand that, this is an ebb and flow of demand and supply, and that because it doesn't meet what it did 6 months ago means that the industry is falling apart. And we don't get paid to say that, it's like, but I really think that everybody just needs to see this, maybe see the micro within the macro.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does, and I think honestly your perspective is appreciated because you've been in the space so long.
Yeah,
you can go, hey everyone, let's just keep things in perspective.
Yeah, and that's and it's hard, I think, too, because sometimes we have, some people aren't as maybe ingrained or as neck deep in the space as we are. So you're looking at this industry from a lens that is compared to some other markets, and so it's sometimes hard to see maybe the nuances that make our space go. But we're still really bullish on where we think the industry is going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, and it'll be really fun to watch it happen.
Absolutely. We will continue to track it here, datacenterhawk.com, obviously, and you can check out some of the other podcasts we've done where I think you put some more color commentary around some of these topics we talked about today. But anyways, 2023 predictions. In 12 months, we'll come back and see how we did.
12-month accountability.
Yeah, if we're wrong, we're just going to skip the 2024 prediction.
You won't see it.
Yeah, we won't mention it at all. So we're only going to take a victory lap if we won.
That's right. That's right.
Anyways, thanks for joining us. Again, datacenterhawk.com for more information. We'd love to connect with you there. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.